Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you about this tonight. And I can't claim to be an expert, definitely not, but I am very passionate about perinatal mental health. And I suppose I want to talk to you really about why I thought it would be a very good idea to put together a book on perinatal mental health for midwives and student midwives. So I want to take you on a bit of a journey. So you can see a picture here, and that's of my daughter. And part of my experience in perinatal mental health is through lived experience, through both my daughter and my stepdaughter. And this picture here, and I'm not showing her face, so she'll be absolutely fine with it, is a picture of my daughter a few years ago when she was going through a hypomanic episode. And she had lovely long hair. And through this hypomanic episode and being very impulsive, she shaved everything off. And this was after some psychiatric inpatient admissions. And I really came to learn through this lived experience of caring for somebody with a mental health illness that actually sometimes mental health can be very loud, and you can really see those symptoms manifesting through that illness. But sometimes equally it can be very silent, and you might not always realize that somebody is going through internal struggles on a day-to-day basis. And that was really a big learning curve for me. And also, like with any illness, sometimes lots of people can fall in between. So I think that mental illness, physical illness equally is important. And it really got me thinking, because sometimes I felt very helpless and I didn't know what to do. And I thought about these young women, and I thought about their mental illness, and I thought about lots of young women who might have mental illness, and actually young men too, who one day might want to become fathers. Young women might want to become mothers. And as a midwife, I thought, well, what can I do just to maybe help a little bit, just to help women feel maybe more supported and help get the word out a little bit more about perinatal mental health. And that's when I thought, okay, so perhaps a book might be a good idea. And this is the result of that. So it was written in collaboration with definitely lots of experts, including Judith, who's online with us today. And I thought I would give you a bit of an overview of what's in this book and what's included in it. Because I think that probably some of it is what you would expect. So an overview of perinatal mental health illnesses, and that includes eating disorders and personality disorders and other severe mental illness, and also medications used to treat perinatal mental illness, because I think as midwives quite often there seems to be a lack of training around this, and that's something that seems to come up time and time again. And so I think just having a very basic understanding of the types of medication that are used to treat illnesses associated with mental health is really important. And also, and Judith will talk more about this a bit later on, psychological concerns. So looking at the different areas in pregnancy where women might experience phobias or perhaps have had previous losses and previous traumatic births. And I think it's worth saying at this point that actually, for some births, sometimes what a midwife might think, oh, that was a really lovely birth. For a woman, there may be elements of that might be traumatic. And I think it's really subjective. And I think that we all have to remember that. And also things like complex social factors that might contribute to perinatal mental illness. And I think if we think back to the Membrace report in 2019, which highlights approximately 549 women died between 2015 and 2017, and 20% of those women were known to social services. So again, all of these factors contribute to perinatal mental illness. I think there's a chapter in this book as well that captures really beautifully cultural perspectives. and really talks about not just different cultures, that's really important, but also that some women aren't happy after they've given birth. Because I think in lots of societies, there's this expectation that women should feel happy after giving birth. They should feel happy because they have a new baby. But for some women, that's just not the case. And this chapter written by Cathy Ashburn really addresses that. And it's a really lovely chapter to read. We also include a little bit on the parent-infant relationship and how mental illness can impact on that. And we bring fathers in here as well. And that's really important because we know that there's an RCOG report telling us that actually many men, fathers, experience anxiety and depression after babies are born, but there's a lack of resources there to support them. So that was another thing that was really important to include. And then this is, I love this chapter, it's Midwifery Toolkit. So for all the midwives out there, because actually all of us at some point will come into contact with women who may be affected by perinatal mental illness. And I think it's really important that we have something that we can go to that will actually help inform our practice. And this chapter is all about that. So looking at how to support women during the antenatal, intrapartum, and postnatally too. And I think fundamentally, we look at the psychological aspect of intrapartum care, thinking about things like expectation, control, and outcome. And those form a large part of the discussions in that chapter. And also Anna Madeley, who contributed to this chapter too, talks about creating a safe space for birth during this chapter. So there's also, we also thought it was really important to think a little bit laterally as well and think about other factors that might contribute to the development of mental illness or increased anxiety. And we were lucky enough to have Professor Damien Riggs, who wrote a chapter, co-authored a chapter, looking at experiences of midwifery care, both positive and negative, for men, trans, masculine, and non-binary people. And actually, in that chapter, you get a real sense of how some people feel going through that pregnancy continuum. And some people do feel very isolated and alone. And it massively depends on the midwifery care that you receive. And the last chapter really focuses on extraneous factors that might contribute to, perinatal mental illness. So there's lots in the media about perinatal mental health, which is a good thing. And two things that we just can't ignore are COVID-19, and I think, importantly, social media. COVID-19, from my own research that I conducted during the pandemic, during the first and second wave, where we conducted a mixed methods design, and through an interim analysis, we looked at that qualitative element. And women really spoke to us about how they felt. And, women were feeling very isolated. They were feeling alone. They were very worried about what might happen to them during labour. If they had COVID, would they actually receive any care? Some women talked about how their partner might feel detached and did feel detached because of restrictions put in place by the hospital to help prevent the spread, the viral transmission of COVID-19. And also Black and ethnic minority women found it really scary that they were hearing all of these news reports saying, that they were increased risk of being hospitalised from COVID-19. And if you think back to that time during the first and second wave of COVID, it was a really scary time for pregnant women and also for everybody who was working in the NHS. I know that I felt very scared sometimes, especially during that first wave where we knew nothing about COVID. So that also factors into this chapter. And also social media, which can be massively positive, but actually we know that it can also be quite damaging. So things like isolation, and for young women especially, body image, things like cyberbullying, and actually feeling inadequate when you're comparing your life to what you're seeing on social media, which is quite often, a virtual life that doesn't really represent what's happening in reality. So that's basically an overview of the book, and there's lots of clinical practice points and top tips, and also a section on how midwives can look after themselves as well, and little copy of it right here. So there you go. So really just to finish off, I suppose, and I'm sure many of you watching this will know this already, but I think it's always good to bring this back and look at the scope and the enormity of perinatal mental health and perinatal mental illness. So women can develop mental health issues for the first time during pregnancy, and I think that's something that's so important to be aware of, because actually, you know, as a midwife, it might be the first time that this woman is disclosing something to you, how she's feeling about her own mental health. And it's such, you know, it's so powerful to enable somebody to be able to do that. 1 in 5 mothers suffer from anxiety and depression in the antenatal period or the first year after birth. Again, that's a huge amount of women suffering from depression and anxiety. 1 in 1,000 women develop postpartum psychosis, and that risk is increased with existing mental illness. And again, you know, for women where they feel like they've got to hide things because there's still a huge stigma in some cultures surrounding mental health, you might be, as a midwife, that first point of contact where you can, you know, talk to the woman and really find out what's going on for her, and actually also talk to the families as well and provide that holistic care. So I think it's really key to say that midwives can play a huge role in supporting women, especially as part of the wider multidisciplinary team. And what I've learned as well through my own experiences of mental illness is that sometimes you can't fix things. And it's not always about fixing things, but it's about acknowledging and validating, and sometimes just listening and nodding and holding somebody's hand. Sometimes that's all you need to do to make somebody feel empowered enough to talk about their mental health and how they're feeling. And that's the same for fathers who might experience that low mood and depression. And on postnatal visits, again, you might be that one person who that father, that mother feels that they can talk to. So I just want to leave you with a final thought. This is not new. It's very old, actually, but it's something that I come back to all the time, because people will forget what you said, forget what you do, but actually, and I think this is absolutely key in validating and acknowledging how people feel, they will never forget how you made them feel. And as midwives, I think that, you know, we're probably already very aware of that. How we make women feel, how we make families feel, how we build those relationships is so important. Thank you for listening.